Welcome to the Finance Forum. I'm Abdu-Raof Hanslo. Today, again, we take on a very important topic to most of our community and most of our viewers, and that is anyone who is employed, and that is employee benefits. My guest in studio is Mr. Etienne Wilsnach of Alchemy Financial Services, a financial planner by profession. Hi to you, Etienne.
Hi, Abdu-Raof.
Always a pleasure having you, sir.
Absolute pleasure.
Etienne, firstly, I think the topic today is specifically aimed at the employed and those people that's employed and earning an income, monthly salary, and contributing towards various different funds or contributing on the outside separately. So employee benefits. I think firstly, to kick off, can you give us a synopsis of what exactly employee benefits are and who is it for?
Okay, so in the formal employment environment in South Africa, most of our formal companies, our bigger companies, offer what we call employee benefits, which is either risk or what we call savings and retirement planning elements to it that provides the employer with either risk benefits. In other words, if they die or they become disabled, they would be able to replace their income with the families. So it becomes a bit of an HR component. Says that, you know, my husband worked for your company, he earned an income, and if he died, how can you assist? So the companies would put employee benefit, risk benefits in place that would replace their income after their passing, or they would have, in addition to that, what we call retirement savings options that would provide them with an income at retirement that would replace what they would have earned pre-retirement. Okay, so it's basically benefits that's put in place by the company that would provide either risk or retirement funding for their staff.
So, Etienne, let me get this right. Employee benefits, I think to most of us, is basically a pension fund or provident fund or retirement fund that our employer basically implements that we could belong to.
Yes.
But you've taken it a bit further. You've mentioned something that there's also risk benefits attached to it.
Yes.
So what are the common, in today's day and age, I mean, if employee benefits are offered to an employee, what are the common benefits found within that specific model or that product?
Well, my personal view is, firstly, it is compulsory often. So many companies would offer you employment, and part of your package they would say that you need to be a member of their fund, which I think is a good thing. Okay, so firstly, there's the compulsory membership. It is generally a bit more affordable than individual life cover. So in other words, in most cases, the company would contribute all or part of your premium or your contribution to that. So in other words, you're only paying for half of it. That's the second benefit. The third benefit is that quite often the risk rating of that would be dealt with as a mass. In other words, economies of scale. So that if you often people would be a diabetic, or they would have a condition that would disqualify them from normal risk benefits at any other institution in their private portfolio, okay, but through the employee benefits they would have qualified, and that is one of the biggest benefits in that. So I'm a type 2 diabetic, and if I went to a normal life assurer, I would be disqualified from it. I would be able to get these benefits with my employee benefits.
Okay, now basically the risk cover that you're speaking about, Etienne, within these benefits, is it specifically a life cover? Is it specifically disability or dread disease cover? Or what type of benefits, or could all of these be built into basically a employee benefits?
So that would depend on which fund the company have chosen, but the more common anomalies would be life cover, disability cover, and some degree of funeral expense cover.
Okay.
So it would be either or a combination of.
Now ultimately, a lot of our people are avid investors. So where they would find opportunities in the market or look at specific funds to invest in, and in some cases this would be retirement annuities, Sometimes this would just be normal investments. How does employee benefits differ from your investment portfolios and the policies you have separately in your life?
Okay, so I wouldn't call it differ. The reality is it would often be a contribution too. So it would depend on what your employment relationship is, or what the setup is with the company that you're employed with. So as I said earlier, if it's a compulsory benefit, in other words, I've joined a company like Old Mutual, where part of my employment structure, my benefit, my package is employee benefits. That includes both pension funding and risk benefits. Then it would just be calculated as part of my portfolio. So when my financial advisor sees me and he does a financial needs analysis and he does comparative between assets and liabilities, he could actually include those in the calculation because they just benefits. The only difference is they are provided for me by my company.
Now, Etienne, on the outside, if one has employee benefits and one is covered for life and one is covered for disability, and you have a pension or provident fund within that fund, a retirement fund of some kind, why would it be necessary then to look at, or let me rephrase that, would it still be necessary to relook at your portfolio and or your financial plan and basically add to that with additional policies like life policies, like additional disability cover, like retirement annuities, like investments?
Okay, so this is my personal view on it from experiences. There's two elements to this conversation. One is it sufficient? In other words, if I have a bond of 1.5 million and I would have an income need of 40,000 Rand per month or 10,000 Rand a month, would my employee benefits be sufficient to cover my needs? That's the first. If the answer to that is no, then obviously you would need to top that up in your personal portfolio. Okay, so that's the first reason. The most common one for me is people often forget that you might change employers somewhere in your life. So let's say you've worked for Old Mutual for the first 10 years and you say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything in my personal because I'm okay. What happens if at 32 years old you now change employer and you go to a new company? You could become self-employed, or to a company that does not offer benefits. You now have nothing. So what happens is you've got to now start the process much later in your life. The risk to that is that either you are older, so in other words your risk rating would change because you're no longer not 22, you're now 32. My warning though is, what if you contract any condition that disqualifies you from applying for individual cover later on in your life? So often at 40 you need far more cover than you would have needed at 20, because you have a bigger house, bigger property, you earn more. The life stage that you're at requires more benefits. What if you change employer at 39 to become self-employed, but you have high blood pressure and you might not qualify, or you've contracted a medical condition that disqualifies you from getting new cover in your private portfolio? You might have a problem. So never assume that employee benefits on its own is sufficient. You have to look at it holistically.
Now you touched on a good point, and that being sufficiency throughout your life to make sure that your needs are covered for the event that you're saving for. So ultimately, employee benefits looks at various different aspects of your life, and it covers various different aspects of your life as far as coverage is concerned, including retirement.
Okay.
However, we find that although people are employed and they are contributing towards the retirement part of the employee benefits, you still find them investing in retirement annuities.
Yes.
And substantial amounts. Now we know that there's benefits to that in the short term, and there's benefits in the long term to contributing towards retirement annuities. When taking this contribution to a separate retirement annuity and in account with your contribution to your pension fund, how does that benefit you in the short and long term?
Okay. So at some point in your life you probably have to make the calculation based on what your income needs going to be at retirement. So if you've done that calculation and you've quantified and said, hang on, I'm going to need X amount of money when I retire, and there's any reason that your employee benefits does not make up that amount, you would obviously top it up with additional funding through retirement planning in your personal portfolio. There could be a reason, like I might have joined this company at 40. In other words, I only had 20 years of contribution left to retirement. I would then make up by using an individual product like retirement annuities to make up the deficit. Okay. The fun part is that in 2015 with the new pension fund reform, that percentage, the amount that you're now allowed to contribute to retirement planning had been increased. Now, in theory, in South Africa, the best investment is still retirement annuities because of the tax efficiency of it and the fact that your portfolio could have an income based on the performance of the fund. So if you put those two together, it's an incredible investment opportunity. I'm saying there's that old, I'd rather have more than what I need than too little. So I'd rather, if I'm going to have my employee benefits and I'm going to top it up and I might have too much money at retirement, it would be a good problem to have.
The other thing also that I've experienced specifically with retirement annuities, and I've been contributing towards retirement annuities in my personal space for many years, and that is the tax benefit that I get back every year as well. So that's I consider, being in business, we don't get paid bonuses. We don't, and we never pay ourselves bonuses.
No.
So ultimately, my bonus is my SARS return that I get once a year, and that's the season we find ourselves in at the moment. Etienne, when looking at these benefits, now last week we touched on this as well, and that was with estate planning, and that was nominating beneficiaries.
Yes.
Specifically with employee benefits, there is that form where you can nominate beneficiaries. Who can you nominate legally, and how safe or how easily can that be changed going forward?
Okay, so you could, alongside the conditions of marriage being community in and out of community of property, you could nominate anybody as your beneficiary of your proceeds. Okay, what is slightly different with retirement annuities or with pension provision within employee benefits is that the trustees of that fund would have control over who the decision maker is. Now, I'm cautioning when I say that I don't want people to have anxiety, but let's say, for example, the individual had another family that was unknown to the company and they wanted to contest that. They have the right to that. In other words, they can say, but hang on, we lived in the Transkei and we also were dependent on his income. That's the only time that the trustees can supersede or override the decision made in a nomination of a beneficiary.
Okay, Etienne, and when it comes to the employee benefits, now in South Africa we are spoiled for choice, and many a times we're very short-sighted in our decisions, and one of that short-sightedness is that we don't plan ahead. So the question I have basically is, when you're working for an employer and he has employee benefits for his staff, is it compulsory for you to belong to that fund? And I'll follow that up with another question as soon as you've answered that. So
that would, at the moment, it's not compulsory. There's a big drive from government for many years. It's part of the pension fund reform, is to look at making it compulsory for all employers. So, and you know what is nice about employee benefits? If your company is more than at a minimum of 5, so there's that perception it needs to be this big company before you qualify. The truth of it is, if you have 5 staff members, you can apply for employee benefits. Okay. The compulsory aspect, though, depends purely on the employer. He will decide. So if his fund rule says within his company, if you are employed by me, it is compulsory, that's up to him. Okay, but it's not, at the moment, it's not legal for all companies, or it's not compulsory for all companies to have their staff on employee benefits. But big drive from government to make sure that all companies with staff in South Africa, for economic and social and cultural reasons, they're trying to drive that to be compulsory.
Now, in that seat that you're sitting at the moment, we had government officials before. We've also had some economists, and basically the calculations that they've gone through and the amount of money or the amount of outlay the government puts out every single month to cover state pensions is huge. And from an economist's mouth, he said one day, the drive of this new piece of legislation of pension fund reform is basically twofold. It's to give you the maximum benefit as the member of those funds, to give you maximum benefit so that your income can be sustainable at retirement. And number two, the second tier to it, is to take the burden of pension away from the government. So after hearing that from a very learned guest, I immediately wrapped my mind around the topic, and I also became a very staunch supporter of compulsory retirement funding, so where people have to contribute. So I'm with you on that. Wonderful. Absolutely. Etienne, if one looks at the whole scenario, now you mentioned earlier that it depends on the fund rules of the individual fund. In that regard, that it could either be a compulsory fund whereby a member has to belong to it, or not.
Yes.
If there's no fund at all, are there specific policies and funds in place externally that you could lay your hands on that could subsidize your pension for the period that you are employed?
Absolutely. So that's whenever I referred to individual products or individual portfolios, that would be the traditional consult your financial planner and ask him to assist you with whatever your goal and your need is. So if your goal is at the stage in your life is, Etienne, I need to make sure that my family eat if I buy, that's risk benefits. If we can have that conversation, then it would be individual risk products in place. Or if your concern is, Etienne, I'm 45 years old, I would like to retire 20 years from today, how do I ensure that I have at least 75% of my income in place if I retire? I cannot stand in the SASSA queue. What is the calculation? And then we would look at an individual product that we commonly known as retirement annuities.
Now on the flip side of the coin, can employee benefits then take the place of individualized policies that you have in your life?
I don't think it should ever replace them. I think it should substitute them, and it should promote the entire view. I said there are definite benefits to it. There's tax efficiency with employee benefits. There is the concept of it's the insurable. The risk is better to manage. The fact that most often the employer contributes, so there's a 50% contribution. So in other words, it's a bit more affordable than individual life cover. So each one of them are pros and cons. For me, if your company offers it, dive in there and take it.
Now, Etienne, employee benefits. What's good about it? Number one, and why should I opt for employee benefits in comparison to anything else on the outside? Which is more important? I think that the line should be drawn. If you have the option, the employer is not giving you any offers you employee benefits. That's not compulsory, obviously, and there's policies on the outside. Which one do you opt for? Or is it a weighing idea that you have to go through in order to...
So if you're an individual, obviously you wouldn't have the option of looking at employee benefits. That's for an employer-employee relationship only, with a minimum of 5 staff members. So if I have a small business and I have 5 staff members, I can approach, for example, an Old Mutual employee benefits consultant and say to me, talk to me about covering my 5 staff members, because I would get preferential rates, better tax efficiency, and it's compulsory. But we have the social responsibility to our staff as well, saying that often we employ these people, their families, so that for each one of them there are at least 3 other people that is dependent on their income. So for the 5 people that you employed, there are 15 people that's dependent on that job and the fact that you're paying them a salary. I think it's a nice gesture for you as an employer to say to your employees, I've put you onto these funds, I'm going to ensure that you have funding at retirement, and if you pass on, those 15 people or the 3 people in your family will eat, because as an employer I've ensured that there will be a continuum of that income. It also takes the pressure off my company to take money out of my own pocket and provide for the family, because I've had the conversation with the company.
A few weeks back, we dissected and went into absolute detail on the government employees pension fund and the exodus of funding that we saw due to bad rumors, bad advice, and the prior days financial advisors. And I think the main concern there was that the fund would be dissolved or something like that. So a lot of the members left and picked up the benefits.
Yes.
If I should leave my employee today,
Yeah.
What should I be doing with those benefits right now?
Okay, so it's a very broad question because there's so many possible sets of circumstances you could find yourself in. But for an ideal scenario, if you are still far away from retirement yourself, so let's say you're 39 years old and you've decided you're going to join another company that either has or does not have employee benefits, the first option would be to talk to your financial advisor, take the funding that have accumulated in your fund and move it to a preservation fund. Okay, don't spend it, because that's what we do. We make excuses, people spend it, and then what they don't realize that they've robbed their retirement planning of 19 years of contribution. So in an ideal world, if your fund value says R500,000, take that and put it into a preservation fund. In other words, preserve it in its entirety and don't touch the money. It was never intended for your use. And I know we justify it. But there's no but. That contribution has been accumulated because it's meant for your retirement. Be strict and disciplined about that and invest it in a fund that will preserve it. And then you look at your risk benefits and say, if I compare the cost of these risk benefits to individual product, is it worth my while retaining? And if the answer is yes, with minimal underwriting within 30 days of leaving your employer, you can actually transfer those risk benefits into your individual name. So let's assume you're at Old Mutual with one of the corporate funds, and you can then go to your individual advisor and say to him, I had R1 million life and disability cover, please can we transfer it into my name as an individual? And that can be done within 30 days after you're leaving your employer.
Etienne, in a one-liner, what advice do you have for employees, members of employee benefits?
I would like to start with employers first and say, if you have a business where you're responsible for the lives of others, consider that. Speak to a consultant, give us a call, and let us do an assessment on your business. And you know what? Review the risk versus the cost of it, and look at your company and say, do you qualify? And what would it do for your company's staff morale if you could say to them, guys, I've just put an employee benefit structure in place, you have funeral cover, and you have a retirement and pension fund, and this is my contribution, will you equal it? It will do wonders for the morale of your business, and it will show your intent. For employees, don't shy away from the opportunity to be a member on a fund. Okay, it's the cheapest, the most cost-effective way to get these benefits and to make sure it's in place. So don't shy away from the conversation either way.
Etienne, it's always a pleasure having you here and having you impart your knowledge with our viewers. And this is a topic that I think needs further investigation, and we are keenly watching the outcome of the retirement reform legislation being debated at the moment. So thank you once again for your presence.
An absolute pleasure.
You've been watching the Finance Forum with myself, Abdu-Raof Hanslo, and my very special guest in studio, Mr. Etienne Wilsnach of Alchemy Financial Services. We've been speaking employee benefits and the benefits thereof. Until next time, stay focused to your finances.